food poisoning, serious infections, and deadly cancers. These are just a few of the health risks associated with some of your favorite canned fishes. Seafood in general may not be at the forefront of the American diet, but tuna is an exception. Americans consume 1 billion pounds of canned and pouched tuna annually, no small number and with no small consequences. However, tuna has a risk of mercury exposure, as it breeds in waters which have become contaminated with mercury from events like volcanic eruptions and industrial activity. Alongside absorbing the heavy metal, tuna feeds on smaller fishes contaminated with mercury, and it builds up in their tissues over time. Tuna species at risk of high mercury exposure include albacore, yellowfin, and bigeye, of which albacore is commonly canned. Although the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, has allotted safe levels of tuna consumption in adults per day and week based on body weight, the levels of mercury in some tuna exceed these limits. Mercury exposure leads to health issues such as cognitive defects, anxiety, depression, heart disease, and impaired infant development. Populations such as children and pregnant and breastfeeding women are advised by health authorities to not consume tuna and other high mercury fish.
What the deuce are you staring at? It's tuna fish. And nothing else.
Salmon is a fatty fish consumed for its health benefits and favored flavor. Both wild-caught and farmed salmon are a good source of protein, omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin B12, and many essential minerals. However, canned salmon can be high in sodium, as the salt content helps preserve salmon in canning. A regular flat can of salmon contains around 700 milligrams of sodium, which is nearly one-third of the recommended upper limit of sodium intake set by the American Heart Association. Another concern regarding salmon is its risk of possessing polychlorinated biphenyls, or PCBs, and dioxins, particularly the farmed variety, as it's reared in crowded sea cages. Consuming PCBs in excess has been linked to changes in hormonal health and affects bodily systems. This chemical would need to be consumed in high amounts to have adverse effects, however, so it's best to consume salmon in controlled amounts. Another thing to watch out for in Atlantic farmed salmon is its antibiotic content. Farmers add antibiotics to fish feeds alongside other chemicals to give the fish its pink color for grocery store appeal. Consuming such salmon can lead to antibiotic resistance and other adverse health effects. The deliciously sweet and salty flavor of crab is hard not to love, especially when it's a good source of proteins, vitamin B12, and essential minerals.
You gotta love crab.
Its omega-3 fatty acid concentration also contributes to heart health. However, the relatively harmful effects to your health are commonly associated with brown crabs and their meat. Brown crab possesses high levels of cadmium, a toxic heavy metal which can have harmful effects to your health when consumed in excess. A recent study in Toxics acknowledges the presence of cadmium in brown crabs. It is advised to consume brown crab in moderate amounts until risk levels are properly established. Additionally, canned crab can be a source of increased sodium, as a 6.5-ounce can of blue crab contains 704 milligrams. This amount is nearly one-third of your sodium intake's recommended upper limit and should be limited to maintain health. If Red Lobster's endless shrimp is how you consume much of the seafood in your diet, you might want to get acquainted with where the prized shrimp comes from. The majority of the shrimp farmed internationally are riddled with antibiotics to speed up growth and prevent the spread of disease. These antibiotics create antibiotic-resistant pathogens in the shrimp, and a 2012 FDA study found shrimp imported from Thailand to possess the bacteria Klebsiella, which is resistant to multiple antibiotics. Consuming this contaminated shrimp in excess can lead to urinary tract infections and pneumonia in consumers. To avoid the harmful health effects associated with antibiotic resistance and the massive carbon footprint of farmed shrimp, it is often advised to opt for wild-caught shrimp. The thin, finger-like length and thickness of anchovies doesn't seem like much, but these are a nutrient-rich food.
No anchovy.
With extra anchovies?
They're a good source of vitamin B3, selenium, and contain 13 grams of protein in a 43-gram canned serving. In this same serving, they also contain 1,650 milligrams of sodium, accounting for over 70% of your recommended sodium intake at the upper level. For such a small serving, it's easy to eat more than a single can, but be mindful of your consumption, as it can increase blood pressure significantly. The high salt content is due to how anchovies are processed, by first gutting and then curing with salt to draw out water and avoid bacterial growth. To reduce the elevated salt intake, it's advisable to wash anchovies before eating. Oyster towers are the pride of any seafood bar, nestled in their hard shells and offering a deliciously bright or earthy flavor when eaten fresh. They're also a good source of essential micronutrients such as vitamin B12, zinc, copper, selenium, and antioxidants. In the case of canned oysters, you'll find them either smoked or in their natural flavor, typically packed in oil or water, with the oil variety being high in fats. However, there are plenty of risks associated with oysters. According to research, raw oysters can cause bacterial infections as they possess a Vibrio bacteria, which concentrates in filter-feeding shellfish. This infection can cause fever, diarrhea, vomiting, and even septicemia, a blood infection which can lead to death in some serious instances. Moreover, oysters are at a risk of contamination from heavy metals like lead, mercury, and cadmium. Whether you eat freshwater or saltwater mussels, these shellfish are an incredibly versatile food, pairing well with pastas and broths and forked out on their own. Despite being a good source of proteins, omega-3 fatty acids, and micronutrients, canned mussels are heavy on salt, so it's important to watch your consumption. Moreover, mussels suffer from the same fate as many other shellfish, a possible risk of contamination. Consuming mussels caught during a red tide causes shellfish poisoning paralysis, a condition that can lead to respiratory paralysis, gastrointestinal distress, and muscle paralysis. Cooking the shellfish doesn't prevent its contamination, and monitoring programs are the only way to track this occurrence. A good marker of a healthy mussel is the state of its shell, so you should never eat mussels at a restaurant with a broken or cracked shell, as they can cause food poisoning. Overall, mussels can be a healthy and safe option if ethically sourced, but tracking their origin becomes difficult when canned, so it's best to eat the ones from reliable brands. If you love seafood or consume it fairly often, you're no stranger to the briny flavor and soft mouthfeel of a fresh clam. The canned versions are no different, packing essential nutrients like vitamin B12, vitamin C, selenium, iron, and zinc. Unlike oysters, clams are mostly consumed cooked, but eating clams raw or undercooked puts you at a risk of bacterial infections from the Vibrio bacteria common in most shellfish. While picking out canned clams, steer clear of clams canned in or from China. In 2022, the FDA warned against these particular clams, as testing revealed toxic levels of per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, or PFAS, present in them, which have been linked to health risks such as cancer.
Too many clams.
Bad clam.
Although the particular brands with toxic levels were recalled at the time, the threat of PFAS contamination in seafood is still a concern, so it's important to be conscious of the seafood you purchase and consume. The lure of bluefin tuna isn't lost on most sushi consumers, as it makes up the main seafood meal of an omakase dinner. It's a medley of rich flavors like umami, sweet, sour, and bitter, all in the tender fillets and marinated cuts served mostly raw. The Atlantic bluefin tuna is a variety to wean off of, however, as it poses both environmental and health risks. As early as 2009, when an angler caught a record-breaking bluefin tuna, Ocean Conservation Group Oceana found toxic levels of mercury in the fish. Owing to its size and longevity, bluefin tuna absorbs the neurotoxin methylmercury in its tissues, which increases with time and can affect the health of its consumers. A study by Rutgers on mercury in bluefin tuna from 1998 to 2019 found the Atlantic bluefin that originates from the Mediterranean to be the most toxic. Moreover, since bluefin tuna is consumed raw in most sashimi, it can pose a risk of bacterial infection from bacteria such as Vibrio and histamine, which it possesses naturally. Histamine poisoning occurs even from frozen bluefin tuna, if mishandled, and can cause headaches and allergic reactions like itching and flushing. Widely regarded as a luxury seafood item on most fine dining menus, abalones are similar in appearance to oysters and mussels, but retail at a higher price point due to their slow and cumbersome growth. Abalones are also a good source of proteins, iodine, selenium, and omega-3 fatty acids. In the canned versions, these are available deshelled from the coasts of China and Chile. Whether you sample abalone during your next fine dining meal or decide to splurge on the canned ones, be aware that the origin of your abalone determines their safety. Chinese abalone farms have been at risk of harboring concerning concentrations of heavy metals like cadmium, mercury, and silver in their waters, with a study published in Aquaculture revealing the abalones farmed here pose a food safety risk. Moreover, there is ongoing research in Tasmania on the risk of abalones harboring paralytic shellfish toxins, which can harm consumer health. Until safe levels are determined, it's better to avoid abalones from these areas. As one of the most delicious shellfish, scallops pair well with salads, citrusy dressings, in pastas, and seared lightly or pan-fried with a simple vinaigrette. They're also very nutritious, bearing plenty of proteins, omega-3 fatty acids, and minerals like zinc, selenium, and copper. Although scallops are mostly served cooked, you'll find the canned varieties raw, in which case it's important to cook them thoroughly before eating. According to the Oregon Health Authority, raw shellfish can contain the Vibrio bacteria, and eating scallops raw puts you at a risk of bacterial infections. The FDA recommends cooking scallops until they turn milky white or opaque in appearance and firm for around 3 to 4 minutes. If you want to sample the raw kind, only try them at a specialty seafood restaurant or the ones bought fresh and dry and not harvested in contaminated waters. Another reason to watch out for scallops is their possible risk of heavy metal contamination from metals like mercury, lead, cadmium, and arsenic. Although this contamination is location-specific, studies show higher concentration for metals like cadmium as opposed to others. With little conclusive research available, there aren't any safe levels for scallop consumption yet, so ideally stick to the FDA's recommended shellfish intake amounts. There's nothing like a buttery lobster roll or a decadent lobster thermidor to transform even the most staunch non-seafood lover into a die-hard fan.
Oh, lobster, 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 you are delicious.
Oh, God, I love butter sauce.
However loved this crustacean may be, it's not without its risks. And the way you prepare lobster, how you store it, and where you source it from can determine its effects on your health. Lobsters pack 70% of your recommended daily cholesterol levels. Although current research doesn't consider cholesterol as risky to heart health as previously assumed, it's still important to watch your intake, since studies show elevated levels can negatively affect a percentage of the population. Moreover, canned lobsters can contain elevated levels of saturated fats and sodium, with a 4-ounce can of lobster tails packing 480 milligrams of sodium. Similar to shellfish, crustaceans like lobster should not be consumed raw or undercooked due to the risk of various bacterial infections. Finally, lobsters are potentially low-risk seafood classified by the FDA for toxic levels of heavy metal contamination. At-risk groups like pregnant and breastfeeding women and children, however, should consume infrequently and in smaller intakes.